The image appeared almost instantly everywhere, on front pages, timelines, television broadcasts, and millions of phone screens around the world. It wasn't dramatic in the traditional sense. There were no flashing lights captured mid-motion, no shouting crowds frozen in chaos. Instead, it was quiet, still, heavy, a single frame that seemed to carry the weight of years. Prince Andrew stood there, shoulders slightly lowered, expression distant, eyes unfocused, a man who looked less like a royal figure and more like someone suddenly confronted by consequences he could no longer outrun. Within hours, commentators began using the same words again and again: shell-shocked, haunted, defeated. And whether fair or not, that photograph would quickly become the defining visual memory of the arrest. The image history would return to whenever this moment was discussed. What made the photo so powerful wasn't just who Andrew was, but what he had represented for decades. For much of his life, he had moved through a world shaped by privilege, ceremony, and protection. Royal appearances were carefully choreographed. Public images were polished, controlled, intentional. Royals rarely looked unprepared, and even more rarely looked vulnerable. But this photograph broke that pattern. There was no wave, no composed smile, no confident posture. Instead, viewers saw uncertainty, a fleeting but unmistakable crack in the royal facade. The reaction was immediate and deeply divided. Some saw accountability finally taking shape after years of controversy and public scrutiny. Others saw a deeply human moment, a man facing public humiliation on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. Social media amplified both interpretations at once. Memes appeared beside serious legal analysis. Sympathy clashed with anger. Yet regardless of opinion, nearly everyone agreed on one thing: the image felt historic. Photography has always played a powerful role in shaping how history remembers events. Often, a single frame becomes shorthand for an entire story. People may forget timelines, legal arguments, or official statements, but they remember the image, the visual symbol that captures emotion in an instant. And in Andrew's case, the photograph condensed years of controversy, investigation, and public debate into one silent expression. It told a story without words. Observers noted how different this moment looked compared to earlier royal crises. Traditionally, the monarchy relied on distance and dignity to weather storms. Appearances were limited, statements carefully written, emotions rarely visible. But modern media leaves little room for distance. Cameras follow continuously. Every gesture is analyzed. Every expression slowed down and replayed. The arrest wasn't just an event, it became a global spectacle unfolding in real time, and the photograph turned into its emotional centerpiece. Experts in body language quickly joined the conversation, dissecting every detail: the angle of his head, the tension around his eyes, the way his hands rested awkwardly at his sides. Some argued he appeared stunned, as though reality had finally caught up with him. Others suggested exhaustion rather than shock, pointing to years of pressure culminating in a single moment. Whether accurate or speculative, these interpretations added layers to the image, transforming it into something almost cinematic. But perhaps the most striking element was how ordinary the scene felt. Strip away the title, the history, the royal status, and the photograph could have been anyone facing a life-altering moment. That ordinariness is what made it resonate. For many viewers, it shattered the illusion that royalty exists outside the consequences faced by others. The distance between palace walls and public accountability suddenly seemed much smaller. News outlets began comparing the image to other iconic photographs associated with political or social turning points, moments when power met vulnerability under the unforgiving gaze of the camera. The discussion wasn't just about Andrew anymore, it became about the changing relationship between institutions and public trust. The photograph symbolized a broader shift. Status alone could no longer control narrative in the digital age. Inside royal circles, silence initially dominated. Official responses remained measured and minimal, reflecting a long-standing strategy of avoiding emotional escalation. Yet the absence of commentary only intensified public focus on the image itself. Without competing narratives, the photograph spoke louder. Analysts suggested that sometimes silence allows an image to grow even more powerful, filling the space where explanations might otherwise exist. Meanwhile, public reaction evolved as days passed. Initial shock gave way to reflection. Commentators began asking deeper questions about reputation, accountability, and the long arc of public perception. How does a figure once associated with ceremonial duty become remembered primarily through a single moment of crisis? How does decades-long identity collapse into one frozen expression? For younger audiences especially, the photograph became their primary reference point. Many who had little memory of Andrew's earlier public life now knew him only through this image. That shift demonstrated how visual culture shapes generational understanding. History textbooks may later explain context, but collective memory often begins with what people first see. There was also an undeniable emotional complexity surrounding the reaction. Some viewers felt satisfaction, interpreting the image as justice unfolding. Others felt discomfort at witnessing such visible distress, even in someone widely criticized. The tension revealed a broader cultural question: where is the line between accountability and spectacle? When does public interest become public consumption? Media scholars pointed out that modern audiences participate actively in constructing meaning. The photograph spread not just through news organizations but through millions of shares, captions, edits, and reactions. Each repost added interpretation, each comment reshaped its significance. In that sense, the image didn't belong solely to photographers or journalists anymore, it belonged to the global audience interpreting it collectively. As legal proceedings continued, new headlines emerged, but none carried the same emotional weight as that first image. Statements were debated, timelines analyzed, yet the photograph remained the reference point. Television segments repeatedly returned to it. Documentaries paused on it. Commentators described it before discussing any new development. The arrest itself became inseparable from the visual memory created in that single second. Psychologists suggested the human brain naturally anchors complex stories to visual symbols because images are easier to recall than detailed information. A photograph captures emotion instantly, bypassing analytical filters. That may explain why the haunted look people described became more influential than any written account of the event. For the monarchy, the moment represented more than one individual's crisis. It highlighted the challenge of maintaining mystique in an era defined by transparency and constant visibility. Royal imagery had historically reinforced stability and continuity. Now, an uncontrolled image risked redefining perception entirely. The contrast between carefully staged royal portraits and this unguarded photograph could not have been sharper. Over time, historians will likely revisit the arrest through documents, interviews, and legal outcomes. But long before those analyses are complete, the photograph has already secured its place in public memory. Future retrospectives may display it as the visual turning point, the moment when narrative shifted irreversibly. And perhaps that is why the image feels so enduring. It captures transition, not just a personal downfall or a legal milestone, but the instant when perception changes. When certainty gives way to doubt. When authority meets vulnerability in front of an audience too vast to control. In years to come, people may struggle to recall the exact sequence of events leading up to the arrest. Dates may blur, headlines may fade, yet the image will remain clear: the posture, the expression, the unmistakable sense of a man confronting a reality he could no longer avoid. Photographs have a way of distilling history into emotion, and this one distilled an entire era of controversy into a single, unforgettable frame. Ultimately, the power of the photo lies not only in what it shows but in what viewers project onto it. Shock, regret, accountability, exhaustion, each observer sees something slightly different. That ambiguity ensures its longevity. It invites interpretation rather than closure. And so, as discussions continue and opinions evolve, one thing seems certain: long after debates quiet and headlines move on, the shell-shocked, haunted image of Andrew will remain the picture people remember, the visual echo of a moment when public image and personal reality collided under the relentless lens of history.